Look at him. Boots not even laced right. The laughter cracked through the barracks like rifle fire. I froze, standing at attention, my duffel still half-packed at my feet. Sergeant Miller's voice cut sharper than the cold metal bunks around us. Carter, you look like you wandered in from the retirement home. You'll be gone before sunrise. The recruits roared, boots stomping on the concrete floor, turning my humiliation into music. I kept my eyes forward, jaw locked, but the sting burned deep. That was my welcome to boot camp. No salute, no handshake, just laughter and shame. And in that moment, I wondered if they were right. The barracks smelled of sweat, bleach, and nerves. Rows of perfectly made beds stood like inspection lines, and every mistake was magnified under fluorescent lights. I wasn't the youngest in the platoon. At 29, I stuck out like a sore thumb among 18-year-olds fresh from high school. To them, I was ancient. To Sergeant Miller, I was a problem waiting to happen. He circled me like a wolf, barking for the platoon to, "Watch closely, boys. This is what failure looks like." My chest tightened, but I said nothing. That silence. That was the only weapon I had left. After lights out, the whispers kept rolling. Corporal Johnson, the loudest of the recruits, made sure the whole room heard him. Better start warming up the bus. Old man Carter won't last through week 1. The others laughed. I turned to the wall, my blanket stiff under my chin. That kind of ridicule, it cuts deep, sharper than any blade. But I'd learned long ago, if you flinch, you lose. So I lay there listening, letting the sting sink into my bones. And yet, out of the corner of my eye, I caught Ramirez watching. He didn't join in. He just lay still, eyes open, expression unreadable. A silent nod when no one else was looking. It wasn't much, but it told me I wasn't completely invisible. Morning came brutal. Reveille blared, boots slammed the floor, and we sprinted to the drill yard. The air bit with cold. Frost on the ground turned every push-up into punishment. Miller stalked between rows like a hawk, waiting for someone to break. When my arms shook, Johnson sneered from the corner of his push-ups. "Told you, Sergeant, he's dead weight." Miller pounced. "Carter, on your feet." I stood, chest heaving. "You're slower than my grandma. Drop and give me 50 more. My knees ached, my lungs burned, but I dropped without a word. Every push-up was another. Laugh at my expense, but I forced my body to move. 1, 2, 3. Each rep was defiance. Later in the chow hall, humiliation found me again. The lines snaked long, trays clattering, boots squeaking against the floor. I carried my food like everyone else, head down, quiet. But Johnson wasn't done. As I walked past, his shoulder slammed into mine, and my tray hit the ground. Food scattered across the tiles, gravy splattering on my boots. The room went silent, then erupted with laughter. A spoon clattered, echoing like a bullet. My hands itched to grab Johnson, to put him on the floor. But I didn't. I bent down, picked up every piece of that meal with steady hands, set it back on the tray, and walked on. My dignity was all I had left to carry. Ramirez, sitting near the back, slid his cornbread quietly onto my tray when I passed. He didn't say a word, but I saw it in his eyes, respect. Small, silent, but real. That night I sat on my bunk, polishing my boots until the leather shone. Around me jokes flew, cards slapped against the table, laughter filled the air. I stayed quiet. My past, my brother, the reason I'd enlisted, remained locked inside me. None of them knew. None of them cared. To them, I was just the weak link. But I swore to myself, staring at those boots, that I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. As taps echoed and lights dimmed, I caught Sergeant Miller watching from the doorway. For once, he didn't bark. He just studied me, arms crossed, as if trying to decide whether I was stubborn or just foolish. I looked straight ahead, spine stiff, refusing to give him the answer. Maybe he saw something, maybe not. But I knew this much. I'd been laughed at, mocked, humiliated, and still I was here. What none of them realized was that storms don't last forever, and mine was only just beginning. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The rain came down hard that morning, hammering the drill yard like 1,000 tiny grenades. We were soaked before we even hit the first lap. Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the storm like thunder. "Move it, recruits! The enemy doesn't wait for the weather." Boots pounded mud, breaths came ragged, and I kept my eyes forward. Every step felt like I was dragging lead, but I refused to be the first to quit. Behind me, Johnson's voice pierced. The rain. "Old man Carter's slowing us down! Somebody get him a cane!" The platoon laughed, even as water streamed off their helmets. My jaw clenched, but I kept running. I had nothing to throw back except my silence. By the second lap, mud sucked at our boots, turning each stride into punishment. My chest burned, lungs screaming for air. Johnson stayed just close enough to keep mocking. "Hey, Carter, want me to grab you a rocking chair when this is over?" A couple guys nearly tripped laughing. I pushed harder, forcing one foot in front of the other, every stride daring my body to collapse. The rain blurred the edges of the world, but through it all, I noticed Ramirez 2 steps behind me. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't even looking at Johnson. His eyes were locked on me, calm, like he was measuring something no one else could see. By the time Miller called us in, my arms and legs felt like rubber. We hit the ground for push-ups, mud splashing under our palms. Miller's boots stomped near my head. "Carter, keep that back straight. You think the enemy's going to wait for your form to improve?" I gritted my teeth, mud filling my mouth as Johnson's snicker echoed next to me. I wanted to spit something back, anything, but all I did was dig deeper and push. My arms trembled, but I finished every rep. When Miller finally called halt, I was the last man still moving. That silence, the pause before anyone stood, felt heavier than the storm. Later in the chow hall, the smell of powdered eggs and burnt toast filled the air. Recruits shoved trays, traded insults, laughed about the morning drill. I sat alone, wiping rainwater off my face, shoveling in eggs that tasted like rubber. Johnson strutted past, tray in hand, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Careful, boys, Carter's liable to fall asleep mid-bite. Maybe we should cut his food smaller." Laughter rolled across the tables. My hands tightened around the plastic fork, but I didn't look up. I kept eating, slow, deliberate, like each bite was a promise. Then something small but sharp happened. Ramirez slid his bread across the table to me. No words, no eye contact, just a quiet offering, almost invisible to anyone else. For the first time in days, I felt seen. That night after lights out, I stayed awake under the red glow of the emergency lights. Most recruits passed out fast, boots still drying near their racks. I pulled a field manual from under my pillow, pages wrinkled and damp from the rain. My eyes tracked every diagram, every note on combat engineering, on survival. I read until the letters blurred, until exhaustion pulled me under. Somewhere in the dark, I heard Ramirez's voice, barely a whisper. "Don't let them break you, man." I froze, unsure if he was talking to me or himself, but it sank deep. It was the first time anyone had said anything that felt like hope. The next day brought the weapons drill. Each recruit had to disassemble and reassemble their rifle under Miller's glare. Speed mattered, precision mattered more. One mistake, and the whole platoon paid. Johnson went first, all swagger and speed. Click, snap, slam, done in under a minute. The others cheered like he'd won a medal. When my turn came, Miller barked, "Let's see what our grandpa's got." I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, parts spread out before me. My fingers moved slow, methodical. The jeers came quick. "Hurry up, Carter. At this rate, the war'll be over." Johnson leaned close, whispering, "You'll never belong here." My heart pounded. Sweat slicked my hands, but I kept going, steady as a clock. Piece by piece, the rifle came together. I snapped it shut, checked the chamber, and laid it across my knees. Miller's face didn't change, but for 1 second I thought I saw a flicker in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or curiosity. He said nothing, just moved on. But for me, that silence was louder than applause. By evening, exhaustion clung to us like another uniform. The barracks buzzed with low chatter, card games, the scratch of letters being written home. I sat polishing my boots, the leather catching the faint glow of the overhead light. Johnson leaned against my bunk, smirking. "Why do you even bother, Carter? You think shining those boots is going to hide the fact you don't belong?" The others chuckled, waiting for me to crack. My hands kept moving, cloth sliding steady over black leather. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a word. Finally, he huffed and walked away. Ramirez from across the room gave me that same unreadable look, but this time I saw it, approval. The days blurred together. Rain drills, endless push-ups, inspections that picked apart every detail of our lives. I felt the weight of their doubt every second, like a pack I couldn't drop, but under it, something else grew. Discipline, grit, the kind of strength that doesn't show in your muscles but in how long you can hold your ground when the world pushes back. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the strongest, but every day I was still standing, and that started to matter. Then came the moment none of us saw coming. It was supposed to be routine, an obstacle course at dawn, walls, ropes, mud pits, nothing new. Johnson was out front as always, showing off, shouting back at me, "Try to keep up, old man." The platoon laughed, but halfway through at the high wall, his boot slipped. He fell hard, landing twisted, screaming in pain. The laughter died in an instant. Miller's face went stone cold, barking orders. "Get him up! Move! Move!" But nobody moved. They froze, wide-eyed, the fall rattling their confidence. Without thinking, I stepped forward. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I climbed, dropped, and grabbed Johnson's arm. His face twisted, half in pain, half in disbelief. "Why are you—" he started, but his voice broke. I ignored him, slung his arm over my shoulder, and dragged him forward. Mud clung to us both, his weight nearly collapsing me, but step by step we moved. Behind us, the platoon finally snapped back into motion, rushing to help. But they'd all seen it. Who went first? Who didn't hesitate? When we crossed the line, Johnson's face was pale, his pride shattered. Miller's whistle blew, sharp and final. He didn't shout, didn't mock. He just stared at me for a long second, then turned away. The silence was heavier than any insult he'd ever thrown. That night, the barracks were different. The jokes stopped when I walked in. Nobody said it, but they knew. Ramirez caught my eye and gave the smallest nod, one soldier to another. For the first time, I felt it. I wasn't invisible anymore. But deep down, I also knew this. That was just a taste of what was coming. The real test hadn't even begun. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The storm hit just before dawn, the kind that turns training grounds into swamps and tests every ounce of grit you've got. The air smelled like wet earth and diesel as we formed up in the field, packs heavy, rifles slung. Sergeant Miller's voice boomed over the wind. "Platoon, today you're running the mission simulation. Treat it like the real thing. Mistakes out here will get you killed out there." He didn't need to say more. We all knew. This wasn't about drills anymore. This was about who had what it took. Johnson was already grinning, strutting at the front like he owned the field. "Hope, you keep up today, Carter," he shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "Wouldn't want you slowing us down again." Laughter rippled through the ranks, but I kept my eyes forward. My chest tightened, but not from fear. It was the weight of carrying all the doubt they'd thrown at me since day one. Ramirez stood near the back, silent as always, eyes flicking toward me once. Quick, like a signal only I could read. No words, just presence. Sometimes that was enough. The simulation started with us moving in formation through mud and thick brush. Radios crackled, then fizzled out, static drowning out orders. Miller had set it up that way. We had to figure it out on our own. Johnson barked like he was already in charge. "Follow me. Don't wait for Grandpa Carter to trip." His arrogance grated, but the others followed. I stayed back, watching, moving steady. I'd learned the hard way. Sometimes rushing headlong only got you killed. The rain made everything harder. Boots slipped, rifles got heavy, and visibility shrank to a few feet. We reached a training bridge, a makeshift span over a swollen creek. Johnson laughed as he stepped onto it, shouting, "See? Easy. Just don't be Carter and you won't drown." He barely made it halfway when the boards cracked. The whole bridge tilted. 3 recruits went down hard, sliding into the current. Shouts erupted. Panic spread. One kid clung to a beam. Another dangled by his gear strap, the water tearing at him. For a split second, everyone froze. "Do something!" Miller barked from the bank. But he didn't move. His eyes scanned us, testing. Johnson shouted orders, voice cracking. "Pull them up! Hurry!" But nobody moved fast enough. The current was too strong. If they slipped, they'd be gone. My body acted before my mind could catch up. I dropped my pack, tore a length of rope from the gear bag, and sprinted toward the edge. Johnson tried to block me. "Stay back! You'll screw this up!" His hand hit my chest, but I shoved past him, hard enough that he stumbled. There wasn't time for ego. I tied the rope off to a tree, looped it around my waist, and shouted, "Hold the line!" No hesitation, just command. For the first time, they listened. Ramirez grabbed the rope behind me, anchoring. My boots hit the water, icy and violent. But I pushed forward. The first recruit's eyes were wide with terror, his fingers slipping. I grabbed his arm, hauled him close, and shouted back, "Pull!" The rope went taut. My shoulders screamed. As the current dragged at us, but slowly, painfully, we made it to the bank. He collapsed in the mud, coughing. No time to breathe. The next one was slipping fast. I went again. By the time we pulled the third recruit out, my body was shaking, lungs on fire. Johnson stood on the bank barking useless orders, but his face was pale. He'd done nothing. Ramirez met my eyes once more, that silent nod sharper now, like respect carved into stone. Then it happened. The rope snapped with a sickening crack. Johnson, who had stepped onto the edge, went down hard. His boot caught between boards. The water grabbed him and yanked him sideways. He screamed, arms flailing, the arrogance gone in an instant. "Help! Somebody!" His voice broke under the roar of the creek. Every muscle in me wanted to let him go. After everything he'd done, every word he'd spat, nobody would have blamed me. But that's not who I was. That's not what my brother would have wanted. I dove without thinking, rope still trailing from my waist. The water slammed me, pulling me under, but I surfaced in time to see Johnson's hand. His eyes locked on mine, fear plain and raw. "Don't let me go!" he shouted, voice cracking. My arms burned, my grip slipping, but I grabbed him anyway. The current tried to rip us both away, but I anchored, legs braced, screaming back to the platoon, "Pull us in, now!" For a moment, it felt like forever. My grip nearly broke, my chest filled with water, my strength fading. Then the rope tightened, bodies on the bank hauling with everything they had. Slowly, inch by inch, we came back. When we hit the mud, Johnson collapsed, coughing, shaking, too stunned to speak. The whole platoon stared, silence pressing heavier than the storm. Miller's boots crunched closer. I braced for another insult, another cut, but it never came. He just looked at me, rain dripping from his cap, jaw tight. For the first time, he didn't see me as weak. He saw me as a soldier. The rest of the drill passed in a blur. Orders, movements, checkpoints, all background noise. What mattered was the silence that followed me. Nobody laughed, nobody mocked. Even Johnson couldn't look me in the eye. Ramirez finally broke his quiet with a single word as we marched back. "Respect." That's all he said, but it meant everything. It was the first time anyone had given me that word since I stepped onto this base. That night, back in the barracks, the air was different. Boots lined up in silence, cards stayed. On the table, untouched, Johnson limped past my bunk, stopped, and looked down at me. His voice was low, rough. "You saved my life." He didn't say sorry. He couldn't. But his eyes told the story. His pride was broken, his power gone. For the first time, I had the upper hand, and I didn't even want it. I just nodded, kept polishing my boots, the cloth sliding, slow and steady. He walked away, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Later, as lights dimmed, Miller walked through the rows. He stopped at my bunk, arms crossed. The barracks held its breath. "Carter," he said, voice flat, "today you did what a leader does. You saw the mission, not yourself." Then he moved on. No applause, no medals. Just those words. But to me, it felt bigger than a ribbon. It was acknowledgement. It was validation. It was the moment I'd been waiting for. Lying in my rack, staring at the ceiling, I thought of my brother. He'd been the real reason I enlisted, the shadow behind every step. He never got the chance to prove himself again. But maybe I just had. Maybe I carried him with me when I grabbed that rope, when I pulled Johnson back from the water. Maybe that was the point all along. And as the silence of the barracks settled, I realized something. They would never look at me the same way again. The weak link, the old man, the joke. That man was gone. What stood in his place was someone they could trust when everything fell apart. Someone who didn't need to shout to be heard. Someone who proved, in the worst moment, that he belonged. The storm outside had passed, but the one inside me was just beginning to calm. And for the first time since I stepped into this uniform, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The debrief room smelled of wet canvas and old coffee, the kind of smell that clings to a base after weeks of nonstop drills. We sat in rows, boots still caked with dried mud from the creek disaster. Nobody spoke. Sergeant Miller stood at the front, arms crossed, scanning us like he could read the truth in our faces. The projector hummed faintly, a map frozen on the wall behind him. Johnson sat 2 seats away from me, leg wrapped tight from his fall, face pale but jaw clenched. For once, he wasn't smirking. The silence pressed down on us like weight plates. Everyone waited for the explosion. Miller finally broke it. What happened out there? His voice was calm, too calm, and that was worse than a shout. He let it hang. No one dared answer. Johnson shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, then tried to speak first. We followed the plan, Sergeant. Equipment failure wasn't. Miller's hand shot up. Stop. Just one word, sharp as a blade. Johnson froze. Miller's eyes cut across the room, landing on me. Carter, tell me. My chest tightened, every eye in the room turning. For months I'd been the joke, the punching bag. Now Miller wanted my voice. I swallowed, kept it steady. The bridge failed. Recruits went down. Johnson froze. I tied in and pulled them out. The words hung heavy. Miller didn't move, just kept staring. Johnson snapped back quick, desperate. That's not how it happened. I was giving orders. He acted without command. His voice cracked. Too high, too fast. A couple recruits shifted uncomfortably. Ramirez sat straight-backed, eyes fixed forward, but I saw the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. He knew the truth. He'd seen it all. Miller let the silence stretch again before asking, slow and deliberate, "Who here saw Carter take control?" The room held its breath. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Ramirez raised his hand. One hand, steady, unshaking. It cut the silence like lightning. A couple more recruits followed, hesitantly, then another. One by one, hands lifted. Johnson's face drained of color. The power he'd carried for weeks evaporated in seconds. Miller's eyes locked back on him. "You froze," he said flatly. "You endangered your team. Carter pulled you out." Johnson's mouth opened, but nothing came. He looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. For the first time, he had no weapon left. No words, no pride. Just shame. Miller turned his gaze to me. "You disobeyed nothing. You acted when it counted. You carried your brothers. That's leadership." The words slammed into me harder than any insult he'd ever thrown. For months I'd waited, endured, kept silent. Now in front of everyone, he gave me the one thing I'd earned but never expected. Recognition. The air shifted. You could feel it in the room. Recruits who'd laughed at me the first day now looked at me differently. Not pity, not amusement, respect. Johnson sat stone still, staring at the floor, shoulders slumped. His downfall wasn't loud. It was quiet, humiliating in a way even he couldn't fight. Ramirez finally glanced at me, just once, and gave that same small nod he always did. But this time it meant more. It meant the silent ally had stepped into the light, even if just for a second. That tiny gesture burned brighter than all the mockery that came before. Miller dismissed us without another word, but the moment followed us out. In the chow hall, the noise felt different. No one tripped me. No one mocked my tray. When I sat down, space opened around me naturally, unspoken. Johnson limped in late, tray rattling in his hands, but the room didn't bend to him anymore. Conversations died when he passed. He dropped into a seat alone, shoulders hunched. The same platoon that once fed on his arrogance now looked at him with cold distance. That was his punishment. Losing the crowd. Losing his power. And he knew it. Later, back in the barracks, I polished my boots like always, cloth moving in steady circles. Johnson came by, slower this time, leaning hard on his cane. He stopped at my bunk, eyes dark, jaw working like he wanted to spit something. The whole room froze, waiting. Finally, he muttered low, "You saved me. I don't understand why." His voice cracked on the last word. I looked up, cloth still in hand, and said the only thing that came to me. Because that's what we do. We don't leave each other behind. He stood there for a long second, then nodded once sharp and limped away. No apology, but maybe something close, and that was enough. That night, Miller did his usual round through the bunks. Boots lined, uniforms ready, silence tight as he walked past. When he reached my rack, he stopped. The room went still. He looked down at me, arms folded, face unreadable. Then without a word, he gave me a single nod. Not a smile, not a speech. Just respect, plain and silent. In this world, that meant more than medals. It meant I was no longer invisible. As the lights dimmed, I lay back and let the silence wash over me. For the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. They saw me now. Not the joke, not the weak link, but a soldier who could carry his weight when it mattered. The twist wasn't just that I'd saved Johnson. The real twist was that in saving him, I'd freed myself. Their respect was no longer a question, it was mine. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the fight. It was the beginning of something bigger. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The barracks were quieter than usual that morning. No trash talk, no laughter bouncing off the metal bunks. Just the low scrape of boots being laced and the clink of gear being strapped. I sat on the edge of my rack, tying my laces with steady hands. Across the room, Johnson limped toward me. For weeks, he'd been the loudest voice against me. Now he stopped, hesitated, then wordlessly set a full canteen down on my bunk. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. The gesture said enough. For the first time since I'd met him, there was no arrogance in his eyes. Just a quiet acknowledgement. Respect. Later on the parade ground, we stood in formation. The cold air cut sharp, flags snapping above us. Miller walked the line, boots striking hard against the pavement. His eyes swept over us like he was measuring more than uniforms. When he stopped in front of me,